In this episode, Tom and Megan take up Spider-Man-No Way Home. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back again with Megan Dougherty for the award-winning, because that's what heroes do. We are on a two-part podcast series with the last two Spider-Mans. We did Far From Home, which premiered last week. This week, we're going to take up No Way Home. So, Megan, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Tom. Glad to be here.
So, Megan, I'm not even sure where to begin with this one. I just love this movie. I love the story. It certainly is. I'm sure you had tears at the end because it was
the beginning too, to be honest.
very sad. But in terms of science fiction, in terms of screenwriting, in terms of action, in terms of bringing back characters who we had seen literally years ago in a way that I thought was just brilliant, this movie, and we get to meet the multiverse, and we get to see Doctor Strange.
I know your favorite.
My favorite. And we get to see Doctor Strange. That is not strangest, but certainly perhaps most peculiar. Anyway, where do you want to start with No Way Home?
Oh, God. Let's start with the opening heartbreak, or maybe the continued heartbreak of Peter Parker's identity being revealed and Mysterio's hideous lie that he's an absolute villain. Just on the timeline of things, and I'm going to talk about his relationship with MJ, which is great. I love a relationship that takes at least one full movie to really develop before you get a payoff. I don't like it when they move too fast. But they had just gotten together. They were open with each other. They were honest with each other. Peter didn't have to lie, and it's great. He's got his team. He's got his people. Everything's going to be fantastic. They're going to have fun zipping around the city. He's going to have fun terrifying MJ. I love that she hates web gliding. And then the world knows. The world knows who he is. The world has been fed this lie. Everyone turns against him, and all of a sudden things get really complicated. And it just hurts a little, because he worked so hard to get that really modest goal, that little bit of personal happiness and comfort and support. And just at the beginning of the movie, boom, it's gone. Everything's really difficult again. So I thought it was a heartbreaking way for things to start. What did you think?
I so enjoyed seeing Matt Murdock that I thought the whole thing was just a setup just to get him in the movie. And for 30 seconds, I got to see Daredevil as a lawyer, and I love that scene. There's this one scene, but there's one scene where he catches a brick that no one sees coming, and they ask, how'd you do that? And he said, I'm a very good lawyer. So I thought the whole thing for me was setting up that one scene.
Fantastic. So, close curtains, end movie. Great job, everyone.
Great job. When is Daredevil coming back? I'm just sick. It got canceled. Anyway, so I thought a lot of that scene. But the heart wrench of him being exposed and the consequences of that, particularly when Ned and MJ were turned down to MIT. I certainly understood Peter Parker getting turned down, but that was heartbreak for him. But for the other two, because they were his friends.
Yeah,
that was heartbreaking. And I didn't go to MIT. I didn't apply to MIT. But for those who can apply and can get accepted, that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
That part was, I thought, pretty tough. But and everybody got dragged down. Aunt May, Happy, his friends around that. But as they move forward, he goes to New York. He seeks out Doctor Strange's solution or a cure, which is a spell. But then we begin to see a part of Peter where he asserted himself, but in a very teenage way. Okay, I want this everything, but I want a few carve-outs. I want a few more carve-outs. Yeah, just a few more carve-outs. Let's keep a few other people out of that spell. And it can't be done that way. And that really sets a chain of events that lead to the rest of the movie. And we get to find out about the multiverse. And the consequences of the uncast spell were just created a great story, because here are the villains we got to see: Electro, Green Golem, Sandman, Venom, and then we got to see the three Spider-Men together.
That was so fun.
And it was so fun, and it was so cool. It was like, I love Tobey Maguire. I wasn't that big a fan of Andrew Garfield, but I thought he was great in this movie. And I went back and watched his Spider-Man and had a new appreciation for his ability as well. He retired from acting or doesn't do very much, don't see a lot of him. And perhaps the same of Tobey Maguire, but I love the original Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. And so to have all of them not only on the screen at the same time, but talking about their own experiences in character. And if you go back and look at the movies, they were exactly describing what happened to them in the movie. So I just thought that part was so well done. I enjoyed it so much. I felt like I was visiting old friends, and it led to a fabulous sort of climactic battle scene. And so where were you in all of this?
I was spiritually and emotionally hanging out with Ned and Em being the best sidekicks ever. I'm also hanging out with my new favorite MCU character, Ned's grandma Lola, who is fantastic. Love that Ned ended up having some magic powers. He was able to access and do, maybe not fully competent, completely untrained. I loved that they were fleshed out in this way. They were shown to be competent, not necessarily very skilled, but willing and capable. And them getting to meet the alternate Spider-Man initially, I thought was hilarious. It was just a great chance for everyone to be really participating and holding their own as characters amidst all of these more famous villains and other Spider-Men. So I was hanging out with them.
So the villains, they were absolutely fabulous. I loved Doc Ock from the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. And so I think Alfred Molina is a fabulous actor. I would pay him to read the dictionary I would pay to watch him read the dictionary. William Dafoe as the Green Goblin from the first Spider-Man. He must have had a lot of work because I don't think he's aged a day. But you really saw how the tension between his personality as the scientist and the Green Goblin really was a character dynamic for him. The Sandman, I was a big fan of Sandman in the original format with Thomas Hayden. Then from the Andrew Garfield, we had Electro, and I had forgotten Venom appeared way back then. But Jamie Foxx as Electro, he was just fabulous. And the way he acted and described, I like this feeling, or I like what this has brought me, you could just see, or I felt like he was inhabiting the role in a way I typically don't see from actors, particularly of cartoon villains. And that he just spread his arms and he became Electro. Exactly. What, if any, were your favorite villains?
Oh, gosh. I did think Doc Ock was great. I particularly liked the way the different villains, when they were in the wizard's dungeon, no way to sugarcoat it, just a wizard's dungeon, the way they snipped and snarked at each other, I thought was great. It was so fun. The intention of Green Goblin, a good guy side, was really interesting. I'm not as familiar with any of these villains. It's been a minute since I've seen the Tobey Maguire. I don't think I've seen the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies at all. But yeah, I enjoyed the interplay between them. I enjoyed Doctor Strange's dawning horror as he realizes exactly what the botched spell has unleashed. And that he had just a convenient dungeon. Amazing. That was great. Just do it down here in the dungeon. That's where we'll put him. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was a great kind of multi-angle battle royale at the end. But I think there's one big point that we need to talk about, which was the end of May. How did you feel about how they approached that, dealt with it? What did you think of her loss?
I've been in love with Marisa Tomei since she appeared on the big screen.
Same, since I was old enough.
Yeah. And so that was very poignant for me, but here's what overshadowed it. They were talking about, each Spider-Man was talking about what they had lost. Mm. And the Andrew Garfield character, he lost his MJ. She wasn't named that. I can't remember what her name was, but his girlfriend, Gwen.
Yeah.
Gwen. And so when he was they were all describing what MJ, or the other two were describing what MJ meant to them. And he started talking about her, and he said, that was my MJ. And it was all in the context of Aunt May and what was about to happen to her. I just realized we all have an MJ. And I thought he was saying we've all lost somebody. And they may not be named MJ, but that was his MJ. And I've had my MJ. You've had your MJ. We've all had our MJ. And that was the line that really got to me.
I think the part that hit me the most about Aunt May's death, her death itself was poignant. Her last words to Peter were amazing. But then it was that the police were arriving. And Happy blocks them for just a second because he knows what's going on. He knows that Peter can't stay. And he gives him this tiny minute to say goodbye. Completely insufficient, but like the only thing he can give him. After he just got dumped. And that's when I lost it. When I saw Happy kind of stepping in between them, the coming police. Ugh.
And the line, with great power comes great responsibility. Uncle Ben said that line.
Yeah.
In both the Tobey Maguire and the Andrew Garfield versions, Uncle Ben was a character and died early on. And when I heard that line, I thought of Uncle Ben. And so it sort of channeled, he'd lost his parents. He'd lost both his parents. And Happy lost somebody. And not that we've never realized Happy wasn't his own character, but he became as real for me in that moment than he had ever been, because the focus was dead on him, literally, what he had lost. We're going to kind of lead up to the end, which was terribly sad. But the other thing that was going on, and why I thought this was science fiction at its finest, and why the MCU works, is we were introduced to the multiverse. And it was not like Doctor Strange in the multiverse that we've previously talked about. It wasn't that overt. But we got a sense of what can happen, what the possibilities are, and that I guess Disney owns Marvel, and they can take this franchise in directions that we have never seen or perhaps even conceived of, but yet are in the comic books that they can use as great source material. So I just thought the multiverse, almost as a tease, were worth it for the movie alone.
I love that they dealt directly with the fact is, yeah, these other versions exist. These other things all exist. These other worlds, these other ideas, these other versions of people that you know, and they're all real. It's like the improv prompt, yes and. So you get this, and you get this, and you get this, and it all gets to exist at the same time. And I think that's what a generous way to treat the cinematic universe.
We get to the end. And so if you haven't seen it, if you haven't seen the movie, big spoiler alert, we're going to tell you what happens.
Huge.
Huge. And to save all multiverses, Peter Parker has to have his planet, our planet, everyone's memory wiped of him. Literally everyone. And I guess at that point I was glad Aunt May died, because it probably would have broken my heart if he'd showed up and she didn't know who he was. But that means MJ, that means Ned, that means everybody. No exceptions. And Doctor Strange, Peter recognizes this has to happen. And so Doctor Strange does the spell. You want to pick it up from there?
Okay, so Doctor Strange does the spell, knowing that everyone who has ever met, known, seen, or heard of Peter Parker is going to forget that he's a person that they know, or that he's a person at all. And Peter knows it's going to happen. He chooses it, again, ceding anything that he would want or need for himself for the good of others. That's the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. That's what he does. And as soon as he does, he gets a brief moment to say goodbye to Ned and MJ, who are furious, understandably, I think, with him for making this choice, but it had to be the way it was. And then we get to the spell is recast, the world is saved, and Peter's best friends don't know him. And he goes to try and do what he promised them, because he promised them, I'm going to come back, I'm going to tell you, we're going to become friends again, it's going to be great. And he meets them and he realizes he really can't, or at least he can't right away. And that hit me a little harder for Ned than it did for MJ even, because, I mean, they've been friends forever. That's the choice that he made, and so it ends off with him sadly setting up a new little apartment and not making the connection with these people that he cares about more than anyone else in the world. And yeah, that's how it ends. That's how the movie ended.
And Megan did a good job, but the poignancy of the scene for me with MJ was just heart-wrenching. And Zendaya, to her credit, played it absolutely perfectly. So good. She could not have done a better job. Recognize that's direction as well. So kudos to the director, but just it was a perfect way to end in the way it had to.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to do that in science fiction.
Yeah, I guess you have to appreciate a movie that is willing to go there and hurt you and make the plot-based decisions that need to be made. Yeah, but it really makes me feel like, man, Spider-Man needs a win. Can we give the guy a win? A really solid one.
And in spite of that ending, I thought this was, for me, by far the best of the three that we've talked about.
I'd agree completely.
Just action, the three Spider-Mans at once, I cannot just emphasize how cool that was.
The way they spoke to each other like brothers.
Yeah.
And I've talked many times on this podcast about how I love men supporting men and being kind to each other and supportive of each other, and they just did so great. And they helped bring out the best in each other in a really beautiful way.
The villains were just fabulous. the wizard's cage or the wizard's lair, where they were. I've completely forgotten about the witty repartee back and
Great
forth.
dialogue.
Great dialogue. If anytime I can see Stephen Strange, I'm going to buy a ticket. I just think he's about as cool as it gets. Chung, is it Chung, the head of the house now? Wong, we find out, is the sorcerer, head sorcerer, and Wong is incredibly cool.
Oh, he's so good.
And it was poignant. It was heart-wrenching in a way that you completely bought it, because it had to be that way. So I just can't say enough about how much I like this movie.
I agree. I think one of the big themes was that different kinds of love are all really valid. And I really particularly appreciate about the movie is that they didn't prioritize the romantic love over other kinds of love, familial, platonic. I thought that they're all important. They all matter. And it hurts when you lose any of them. I don't know. I have my notes here. Why is it always the Spider-Man movies that make me cry? The other ones tend not to make me cry that much, but always with the Spider-Man. So I agree. Fantastic movie.
I hope our listeners will join us again for our next episode. I'm Tom Fox.
And I'm Megan Dougherty. Thanks, everyone.
This is Tom Fox again. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Because That's What Heroes Do. In our next series of podcasts, we're going to go in a little bit different direction where we take up Picard Season 2. Because That's What Heroes Do, or I should say the award-winning Because That's What Heroes Do, is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network.